let me say, a word in defense of reason in dialogue with faith.
Because faith is that proof. Faith unites us to that substance.
But reason, in order to realize its full potential, needs the horizons revealed by and truths contained in the faith. And not just any faith, but the Catholic faith.
But I kept coming back to that image of that child because I came across Mother Teresa's writings and when I was about 12. And Blessed Mother Teresa said in a speech to the National Prayer Breakfast to the Clintons, this little humble nun from Calcutta, she's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, she's an expert on peace, and she had every opportunity in public, when she had the opportunity, she would say very strong words about abortion. Even though she was advocating for things that were less controversial, like the poor, the suffering, the dying, the lonely, the lepers. But she would say very strong things. And at this prayer breakfast, she looked the Clintons in the eye, and this little nun who could hardly see above the podium said, "The greatest destroyer of peace in the world is the cry of the innocent unborn child." And then she said, "In a nation where a mother can kill her own child, what is left but for you and for I to kill one another?" And I read this and I thought, this prioritizes the issues a little bit. For this woman that I respected so much, and I began a devotion to her before realizing what a devotion even meant. I'm a convert. This woman saying this is the greatest destroyer of peace because the mother, the most intimate human of bonds, a mother and her child is turned in on itself, and the most defenseless member of society from a human rights perspective is stripped of their most fundamental human rights. When we have a nation that's founded on the right to life, like our great country, and I love our country, and we love our country, but when we have a nation that's founded on the right to life, like the Declaration of Independence states so clearly, we're given, endowed by our Creator with these rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life comes first. Consider that for a moment, the creed of human rights that we stand by, that nations and the United Nations claims to stand for. It has to start with the right to life. And if the most vulnerable member of society is denied the most fundamental right, you have the potential for a human rights crisis of the most epic proportions. And that's what we're seeing in the United States today. And this is the beginning of the end of democracy. And this is also the spiritual ramifications of this we can hardly wrap our minds around. Because when we consider, St. Paul says in Ephesians that we do not battle against the physical forces. We do not battle against flesh and blood, but that we battle against the spiritual forces. But if the physical forces mean that there's over 1 million children being killed legally in the greatest country in the world, in America, legally, what are the spiritual dimensions of abortion? Even more horrific than the physical. I mean, St. Paul says that the battle is spiritual. And if the physical battle is so bloody and so catastrophic, what is the spiritual battle that we're in the middle of? All of these things, not all of them, I was just beginning to understand some of this as a young teenager. And I would start to think, okay, I got to do something about this. I had a special sense, and I believe it was a grace that God gave me that, look, I've got one, and also maybe being homeschooled. Homeschoolers can think some quirky thoughts sometimes, so that might be it too. But I thought, look, I have one life to live. I could die tomorrow, and we could all die tomorrow. And so I thought, what am I going to do with my life? I want to do something meaningful with my life. And Blessed Mother Teresa is calling abortion the greatest destroyer of peace. And it's coming to my heart so much, and I want to do something about it. And so in my prayer to God, and I would say, I was taught to pray, I was taught that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, I was taught that, He is God, I was taught the Nicene Creed, I had some, taught to read the Bible, taught the Scriptures, and I thought, if I want to give my life for something, if I want to give my life to Christ, what better way than to ask Him to use me? And this is the prayer I began to pray, than to ask Him to use me to do something about abortion. Because that was what began to burn in my heart. It was like, Lord, use me to do something about abortion. Use me to somehow save some lives. And it's really dangerous to ever ask God to use you to do anything for Him. because he absolutely will. God wants to use each one of us to be a part of his salvific plan for the whole world. He uses those saints in heaven quite a bit, doesn't he? I mean, they're offered to us on a platter every day. And for them to get to heaven, do you know how much they had to say yes to God using them on earth? Quite a bit. So if we want to get to heaven like our saints, the friends, ask him, use me. What can I do for you? Use me. Show me what I can do. Show me your will for me. And only when we position our hearts, and we can go to adoration right across the way. I just got to see your awesome little adoration chapel, and you present your heart to Christ and say, here I am in all of my weaknesses, propensities, issues, all of my desires, all of my struggles. Here I am. Do with me as you will. Your will be done in my life. God will take you on an adventure you would never have imagined. And I never would have imagined when I was 13 years old praying this prayer, use me, that I would be founding a national nonprofit, that we would be raising millions of dollars to take down the biggest abortion chain and the biggest political leader of abortion, Planned Parenthood, that I travel internationally, that we do undercover investigations, that we'd be working with attorneys general and district attorneys and police operatives to talk about how to, shut down clinics. I didn't come up with those ideas. It wasn't my plan when I was a teenager to do these things because I wasn't smart enough, frankly, to plan all that. Instead, it was more, God, what can I do for you? Show me what I can do, and then taking the next right step. And then saying, what can I do next? And so live action, when I started as a teenager with some friends, it was really just a youth education initiative to say, okay, we know that there's Planned Parenthood in our community. We know that abortion is happening in the schools. We know that abortion is happening, in the church. In fact, the abortion rate is almost the same in the church as it is in the secular world, and that's for both Protestants and the Catholic. And so, I thought if we could just reach other Christian youth with the truth, that's a good, easy place to start in the youth groups in Christian schools. And so we started by doing pro-life presentations and, knocking down doors for youth pastors, trying to get them to give us permission, frankly, to talk about abortion at youth group. Because abortion is very controversial, and a lot of them didn't even want to talk about it in the church. In these houses of worship in the Protestant community. I know that they're called houses of worship. I'm among Catholics now. The church is the church, and Protestants have houses of worship. But in these houses of worship, that they didn't even want to talk about abortion. They didn't even want to address it. And so all of this, it was just for me, it was the beginning of what can we do beyond this? Start where you are. Start in your community, and then what can we do beyond this? And so at UCLA. I got to school, I realized very quickly this is not a pro-life, the environment there was very pro-abortion. There was a hookup culture at the school, there was a lot of promiscuity, girls were getting pregnant, but there were no pregnant girls on campus. And it was just, it was amazing for me to see that girls were getting pregnant, but what happened to them? And I quickly discovered, I did my first, mini investigation of my health center. I posed as myself, and I just walked in and I said, hey, I think I'm pregnant. Can I talk to the nurse here? And the head nurse at UCLA sat me down and told me that UCLA didn't support women who were pregnant or help them necessarily, but that there were 2 abortionists that I could go see at the UCLA Medical Center, and that they could get the state of California to pay for my abortion, even though I was insured by my parents, so that it wouldn't show up in their insurance. I mean, this was UCLA's advice to me as who they thought was a pregnant student. And when I heard that advice, I thought, first of all, where is the empowerment of the woman in this? It was completely against empowerment of me. It was, you have a choice and it's abortion, basically. It's no choice, truly, it's abortion. But then I also thought, if this is what UCLA is saying at their counseling program, then what is the actual abortion clinic saying? Like Planned Parenthood, who claim to be pro-choice, what are they saying to women? What are they saying to young women who come into their doors every day? And many of you probably are familiar with Planned Parenthood. Raise your hand if you've heard of them before. I think we've all heard of them. Does anyone know how many abortions they do every year? Any guesses? Anyone know? 333,000 exactly in their latest report. Does anyone know how much money they make every year? Yeah. Over $1 billion they have every year. And half of that money comes from the government, exactly. Half of the money comes from the government. So that's kind of they've cornered the abortion market. They're the biggest political proponent of abortion in the United States. Their social media team alone is over 15 people. Live Action social media team is about a half of a person, but our Facebook page is bigger. So that just goes to show, that the pro-life movement is the one on top. But their power politically, and then what they're doing every day to promote abortion at the local level and in schools is huge. And so I knew some of these things. I was seeing what was happening at Planned Parenthood. I saw that they were referred to Planned Parenthood as well, and that there was Planned Parenthood on campus through the CAPS program, doing an intern, trying to get interns from my student body to come. And so I thought, is there something we can do to expose them here at UCLA? And that led me to do my first investigation of a Planned Parenthood clinic. I was 18 years old. Besides going into the health center, I'd never done investigative journalism. But I wanted to do a report for the magazine Advocate that we started to promote the pro-life message on campus. And so I walked into a Planned Parenthood in Santa Monica called, that was on the second floor of a little, coffee shop below it, on the second floor, elevator to go up. And it was right in a beautiful area called 3rd Street Promenade. Has anyone been to 3rd Street in Santa Monica? It's a beautiful area, right? It's shopping, it goes right up to the water, to the ocean, and there's a Ferris wheel, there's restaurants. It's a tourist attraction. But right above this coffee shop is a Planned Parenthood medical abortion clinic open for business. And I walked in and I had a voice recorder in my blouse, I had a camcorder in my bag. It wasn't very high tech. We've gotten a little more high tech since then. But I just wanted to see what they would tell me if I posed as a victim of abuse. Because there's a tight link between Planned Parenthood, abortion, and abuse. Sexual abuse victims, sexually trafficked victims end up finding themselves at Planned Parenthood clinics because the pregnancy is evidence of the crime that's been committed against them. And so the abuser, especially if it's an older man abusing a little girl, wants her to have an abortion quickly to cover up that crime. And if it's a sex trafficker, he doesn't want his sex victims, his sex slaves, pregnant on the job. So he'll take them to a reproductive health clinic that won't ask any questions. And I was researching this, I was studying it, and I thought, what will they tell me if I go in posing as an abuse victim? So I got up the elevator, I step off the elevator, I go up to the waiting room, and there's these glass doors, and I was really nervous. My heart was beating very quickly. It's like a soundtrack. You can hear it on the voice recorder to the whole, the backbeat for the whole investigation. And I step into the waiting room, they buzz me in, and I walk up to the check-in counter, and I look at, the Planned Parenthood workers there, and I say, hi. I said, can I talk to somebody? And she said, yeah, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm 15, and I'm pregnant. And she must have gotten the cue that there was something, something particular about me, because immediately she should have had red flags raised in her head because I'm underage and I'm pregnant. That indicates there's likely abuse happening and indicates there's likely statutory rape, which Planned Parenthood is required to immediately report to the police or to Child Protective Services in every state. The laws are a little different, but in every state there's mandated reporting. And so the woman brought me behind the check-in counter and she said, okay, what's really going on? And I said, well, I'm 15 and, he's a lot older. I said, he's 23. And she said, okay, so what? And I said, well, what should I do? And she laughed and she said, just figure out a birth date that works. She said, lie on the paperwork. Say that you're older than you really are. Nobody needs to know about the secret abortion. We won't tell anyone. He can pay for it. We'll take care of it. That was my first piece of advice at a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic. Lie about your age. We won't tell anyone. We'll give you the secret abortion. Walking out of that clinic, and my heart was just burdened with the thought that, that could have been an actual 15-year-old girl. I'm 18, and thankfully I'm not pregnant, and thankfully I'm pro-life, and I understand what's going on here, but there are 15-year-old girls walking into clinics, 13-year-old girls, 12-year-old girls, even 11-year-old girls, victims of abuse. There's court cases where some of these girls have grown up and are now suing Planned Parenthood, 2 in the state of Ohio, by the way. One of them was a victim of incest, 12 years old, who was abused by her father. One of them abused by a soccer coach, brought to Planned Parenthood in Ohio, and the abuse was covered up, and now they're suing Planned Parenthood for the abuse cover-up. They're real stories. And I thought, if that's what they're saying at this clinic, they must be saying this at all the clinics. They must be covering up abuse, and I knew I'd done my research, I had studied this, and I thought, if people just knew, If the girls at UCLA just understood that this organization is not pro-women like they claim to be, that this is truly not pro-choice, but instead that this is going against the child in the most vulnerable form, but also against the woman. In the objectification of the child, they've also objectified the woman. And that's the way that evil is. Theologically, evil will go all the way to hell. Evil is not satisfied with hurting or killing one soul. It wants all souls. It wants total destruction of anything that is good. And so attacking the child, attacking that abortion is not good enough for evil. It's not good enough for Satan. He wants the abuse to continue for the woman. He wants a cycle of abuse. He wants the woman back in there for another abortion. And Planned Parenthood is happy to promote it, because part of their ideology is not only that abortion is somehow choice and okay and even a good thing, but also that there should be a sick code, what I call a sick code of confidentiality or secrecy around abuse. That human sexuality is not the way that we understand it to be, but instead that sex with anyone, anywhere, anytime, for any reason, that's just choice. That's a matter of flexing the human muscle and doing whatever you want. And then if there's consequences, come to Planned Parenthood for an abortion. And that's the system they've set up for our young people, and that's when they're going into our schools and teaching children as young as in kindergarten to experiment sexually and develop sexual patterns of behavior that are only going to harm them in the long run. And that's part of their plan. And when I said at the beginning of this talk, Planned Parenthood is the most evil organization in human history, I'm saying that because, one, they've killed more people than any other single organization by promoting it politically and then by actually killing themselves. And in the United States alone, it's over 55 million. But they've been architects behind some of the abortion practices in places like India and China, where they've actually been part of the architects behind sex-selective abortion. And I'm going to show a video here in just a moment to show some of that investigation we've done recently. But they're also going to our young people and twisting their understanding of sexuality to create the climate for abortion. And that's ultimately what we're seeing in our country today. And some of the favorite promoters of sexology that Planned Parenthood likes to promote is Alfred Kinsey. Kinsey and sexology, and he was a very twisted man. But long story short, is anyone familiar with Kinsey? Something to look up. It's really horrific, but his sexology and his understanding of sexuality is actually in our sex ed curriculum in many of our schools that Planned Parenthood has helped to engineer, and that is being pushed on our young people. And part of that is a misunderstanding of course, human sexuality and what is ultimately creating a climate for abuse. That, adult-child sexual relationships are not a big deal. This was a Kinseyan idea that they're not a big deal. And so Planned Parenthood, I'm getting way detailed here, but the long story short is Planned Parenthood, when they see sexual abuse, they don't consider the abuse victim. They consider her need for an abortion, and that's what they think the solution to her problem is. And so after that first investigation, we started to investigate all over the country. And we started to, take the investigation, and during summers I'd go with a team and we'd travel across the country to do undercover investigations. And, I would start to, I guess you could say I was flattered to see my photo show up on their walls of their clinics. And so I ended up bleaching my hair platinum blonde to continue to go undercover. And then they put my picture up as a blonde next to the brunette. And so I thought, okay, I can go red next, or maybe it's time to, train some new people. And so now, I've retired. I'm too old. But we have a great training program. And, we use investigators of all shapes and sizes, all ages. We've used adult, grown men, elderly women, all different kinds of investigations that we do now, because we're probing different questions that we have from our research department. And these questions can be, what's Planned Parenthood's role in sexism in America? And what is their role in sex-selective abortion? And I'll show this video here in a moment. Planned Parenthood and eugenics. Planned Parenthood is some of the architects behind the pushing sterilization at the time, and contraceptives, and then when it became legal, abortion on minority populations. And it's not an accident that a black baby is almost as likely to be aborted as he or she is to be born. And so we've investigated that and come up with creative ways to expose that. sexual trafficking of minors and aiding and abetting sex traffickers. We documented in 7 different clinics. We sent in an actor posing as a pimp. And this was in clinics, in New Jersey and DC and Virginia, posing as a pimp. And he went in and he said, I have these underage sex slaves. They're 14 years old. And the Planned Parenthood workers said, oh, that's no problem. We'll give you a discount on abortion. Lie on the paperwork, say that your sex slaves are students, and they'll get a discount for all of the services. Even giving advice about how to use these girls for sex after they've been hurt by an abortion. I mean, horrific, horrific stuff, but all connected, of course, to the fact that they're doing abortions at this clinic. So should we be so surprised when they objectify the woman, this young girl, in that way?